Stream's working.
Right back.
Go try to convince Zig. No.
What?
Go try to convince Zig.
Check
Just
the
post
stream
the
on
entire
microphones
Vita.
to
Yeah.
double check the volume levels.
It's totally working. We are live, folks. We got audio and video and everything.
Awesome.
All right.
I'll wait for a second.
All right. Well,
Maybe a minute.
while we're waiting for Spencer, welcome everybody to the Utah Rust Meetup on April 11, 2024. We've got Rex Magana, our guest speaker today, presenting on interactive storytelling using Yarn Spinner, which is going to be super awesome fun. And let's see, do we have any other news? Nope. Just waiting for Spencer, who's trying to convince the Zig people.
Is he really?
Oh, he's at their door.
Just harassing them. You're already presenting.
Now he's wandering around. Are we sure we're waiting for him?
It's about half as loud as I would normally have it for
Right.
my taste. It's
Maybe-
on
maybe
like
got
stuff I
distracted by
like.
Let's
more
see.
pizza.
So you want me to boost it?
I think you'll yell.
Let's make sure that the mic is the correct mic. Yeah, it totally is. Okay, boosting the volume. Thank
They
you.
didn't buy it?
What?
They didn't buy it?
All right, how's that? Oh, it's gonna take a little.
Alright. You didn't even go. You didn't harass them?
No.
You looked in the door and got scared because there's Zig
Okay.
people.
It's like, we don't want their type in here.
All right, Rex, take it away.
Unwashedly. That's how we start, right? Okay. Hi. Alright. We're going to be talking about interactive narratives. Sorry, wrong side. Okay. Interactive narratives with Yarn Spinner, and we're going to talk a little bit about Rust near the end. I gotta admit, this whole presentation touches Rust, but it's not about Rust. It's about one implementation that just happens to be Rust, and we will get into that. But so starting from the origins of interactive storytelling, obviously, like if you were in school in the 90s or 80s, you kind of remember choose your own adventure stories.
Oh, my favorite.
My wife read one the other night to kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure
Actual
out why
book.
I would always die these horrible deaths. it's like I'm chasing a thief. Why do I have to get skewered?
Yeah.
It's like you picked your nose, you hit a blood vessel, and died.
Yeah, seriously. It's like you were eaten by a group. Why?
Yeah, and that was one of their tropes too. They love to kill people off in horrible ways. You're not alone. Actually, a lot of people thought they were really like kind of trashy. You know, a lot of writers didn't like them. People don't like writing them.
Well, I mean, I was 8.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is their main audience was kids, and kids really, really enjoyed them. They sold millions of copies. They still regularly sell copies. They have a solid market, that's for sure. And the original Montgomery family still owns the trademark on it.
Really?
And I think
Choose your own adventure.
so the origins have a lot of influence. Like the Choose Your Own Adventures have a lot of influence on like narrative genre. Honestly, it's only grown from there. We can see it in like things like Baldur's Gate or Skyrim, even narrative adventures, and more recently, you'll see stuff like TV shows incorporating it, right?
Oh, I've seen that one. I did that one.
Yeah.
It was on like Netflix or something.
Yeah, Bandersnatch. This one was written by Charlie Brooker, who produced it and wrote it. And yeah, you essentially grab your controller and then you select the options that you're going to go through, right? So it's a narrative story. It has a bunch of endings, and yeah, it's just hitting a lot of mediums that it previously wasn't. Here's Bear Grylls, which it's called You versus Wild, where you can kind of test yourself if you're as good as Bear Wilds, or you can kill off Bear Grylls by putting them in impossible situations. So we're going to talk about a little bit how to create an interactive narrative story, ways that you can do it. Obviously, you can do it physically through a physical medium. You can literally buy, like a book. They sell these. And
I never thought of this as an actual strategy narrative. I always just thought of it as in terms of like RPG dialogue.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's all these wrong options and these dead ends, and you eventually have to choose the right option.
Yeah. But they do account for deaths. Sometimes you just pick the wrong option. So you definitely, you can write your own, you can, or you can just join a D&D group. A lot of like formulations in D&D is literally just comes from branching, and like you know how sometimes they'll just throw a dice to see what happens. That's a form of RNG that like ties back into a lot of modern narrative storytelling, because like we'll see later where you can actually call random functions and get your RNG and then decide on what to do with that. And it can also be a storytelling element, like you can kind of incorporate it in a lot of ways. So we've talked about physical, you can just write it your own, choose your own adventure story, or you can do it in all code, right?
Nathan, I think you're muted.
Go ahead and unmute yourself on Zoom.
Yeah.
Or wait. Maybe I should unmute myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get the Discord.
Because I can use
Oh, I'm just looking at
the
the.
same the nice conference room microphones. Let me just, okay, over here. So, microphone, that one.
It's like one computer. It's like
Okay,
you have
so
12
now
different
hopefully
microphones.
people on Zoom can also hear. Sorry about that, Taylor. I didn't realize anyone else had actually joined. So good to know.
My bad. Okay. So you can either write it physically. Am I hearing myself? Yeah, the echo. You can either
Turn your sound.
write it physically. No, it's not on.
What? And where's the echo? Oh, maybe it's mine.
Yeah. Or code. Here's an example that's using JavaScript. So they're just saying confirm. Like that will pop up a dialog saying like, are you sure you want to go into the strange house in the woods? And then you can act on that like variable just by saying like if else. You know, that's a way. I don't know if it's a good way. Like you really can't hire writers to write JavaScript for you unless you hire JavaScript developers, right? In which case they're probably not writers. However, that hasn't stopped people in the past from writing games in all code. This is code I'm going to show you from Undertale. Very popular game.
Just hit mute on your computer. Just stop the echo.
Hello?
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 That's fine,
Fine, right? I think I unmuted it.
Anyways,
Very popular game has sold a lot of copies. Here's one of the comments from him. The source code for Undertale is literally just a bunch of rubber bands and tape stuck together saying determination. And that's what it is. So
Do we have
this-
a source for Undertale? How?
it was leaked at one point and then they made a video of it. And this is them scrolling through the code of Undertale. And it is several thousand lines of switch statements and else cases. And you can actually, like, at one point, it'll kind of stop and go.
You'll see case 3006. And then that is like dynamically injecting dialogue into the game. So that's how all of Undertale was written. And again, it's probably sold millions
Like
of
a
copies.
go-to or something?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So obviously physically is kind of outdated. All code is kind of too much, too burdensome. There has to be some in between, right? Like some happy medium. That would be like our own file type. It'd be easy to explain because if you want to hire a writer, you need to be able to explain it to them. And it needs to be extensible. Like you need to be able to write logic in it and stuff like that.
Lick a fish or bite a what is this crazy? How
Right,
do
so-
I keep this from my children?
This is all from Animal Crossing. They actually have a lot of interactive dialogue. And like this is kind of like a chore for you guys of like, what do you think you would need in a modern day interactive kind of dialogue format that you made yourself? Like just by looking at these at these pictures, what kind of features do you think you need to support? And
Emojis, colored text.
sure, text, rich text.
Choices.
This is kind of related.
Choices is definitely right.
Yeah.
Did you see where that guy tried to convince people in the Matrix game that they were in the Matrix or something? Or like it was this computer game. He's dialoguing with these NPCs and he's like, you're in the Matrix, and they were like, he's trying to convince them and stuff, and they were like, and so I was like, how do you come up with this AI dialogue of like, this is like I understand this context and like yeah.
Wait, what does this have to do with AI?
I don't know.
There's no AI. He's not talking about AI.
Okay.
I don't know how to answer your question, but it was exciting.
Sorry, yeah. It's just so random.
One of the things we'll talk about is, so definitely we have to support lines, we have to support dialogue, rich text. You spoke about choices. They have options right here that we have to go through. Another things that you can see in this picture is 31 bells. Like, do you think a writer actually went in there and typed 31?
To variable.
Yeah,
for like
variables.
collecting
Right?
and stuff.
And here's the bottom one. This one actually only happens if you reset the game while it's still connected to power. So if you turn it off, and then the next time you open it, he'll be there ready to yell at you. And so that's another thing is where you have to be able to react to program to the game state and then like act on that. So yeah, a lot of modern day interactive stories actually have a lot more than just simple branching from the regular choose your own adventure. They have conditionals, variables, commands, and like I said, RNG. So some of the tools and platforms that we like are already in the industry are Twine, which has been around for a while. This one's web-based, kind of has a funky UI, not really great. Like it has a dated UI, you could tell, like it's several decades old. RenPy creates a certain type of game, but you can definitely use it, and it still is heavily used like among certain communities. Inkle is the closest to what Yarn Spinner is, and it kind of like might have been the precursor to Yarn Spinner because they also have their own language and they have their own compiler and everything like that. And they also have an editor that you can use to make your Inkle stories, I guess. Here's RenPy. Here's the kind of stories that it would make. You know, you got your traditional visual novels like with like your protagonists and stuff. You're kind of hard locked into that style, even though you might not want it. Like because it's a whole platform. Like you gotta like. There are extensions to make it like fit into other game engines, but honestly, if you're going to use it, you're going to be stuck in their ecosystem. That'll make certain types of games. And here's actually a demonstration of like what writing RenPy looks like. So you have your label and start. So this is called start. Like this whole block would be called start. You could jump to this by just saying like jump start. You know. So this line will be displayed. It's actually Pythonic. Like they come from Python. And this menu would show two options. So it'd be like, yes, I can't resist, no, follow directions, right? It would show those two up here. Again, easy to start, but not the greatest if you want to make anything other than this kind of game. Here comes Yarn Spinner. Yarn Spinner is more of a tool and actually kind of like a spec, honestly, because it's like a language spec. We're going to talk a lot about languages, but it really isn't like a platform. It doesn't try to lock you into one type of game. You implement whatever you want on top of this tool. This is actually from the Rust repo by Jan Hohenheim.
Yarn Spinner Rust?
Yeah. So he made this. This is Clippy, and then you can interact and talk to Clippy. Both Clippies, are they? No. What's the guy's name? Ferris, and then Clippy's watching you. Got it. So Yarn Spinner has been used to make a lot of games already.
Oh, I made Night in the Woods. I made Dredge. Wow.
Yeah.
Those are very different games.
Yeah. And a lot of these have actually been won awards, so they're pretty good. Like I said, it's this language spec. The original repo is actually, and most of the code is written in C#, but they promote and kind of like guide people in wanting to write their own implementation because it's just a language spec. If you want to write your own, you just follow the language spec.
Interesting. So the canonical reference outside of the language spec is C#.
Yes.
Which means everybody else literally has to write theirs from scratch.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that C# is like you have to pull that in or anything like that. Their language server is actually compiles down to a DLL that's from C#, and if you're using, we'll talk about this later, but in the VS Code,
so they do provide a C library.
Yeah, you can get language server hints, LSP hints in your VS Code when you're writing Yarn Spinner, which is pretty cool.
There's a language server for VS Code.
But yes, so they're written in C#, but again, like it doesn't really matter because you're as somebody who's implementing it yourself for like another engine, if you're like looking at to implement it in Unreal, you aren't going to be looking at the C# for anything other than like how they did it, and you're going to be working off their language spec and something called Antler, which again we'll go into.
Well, that's if you want to make an implementation.
Yes.
If
you want to use it, you just use what's already out there, and they've got you covered because they have Godot implementation, they have Unity implementation, Unreal implementation.
Do they have a Bevy implementation?
Yeah, Hub says yes.
Yes. Okay, so this is what writing with Yarn Spinner looks like. It's actually really neat. So we have nodes. So this whole thing is a node, and you can see the structure over here. So everything's defined in nodes, and as like that red pipe thing where they said like jump to instant death, this is similar. So you can actually jump to other nodes. So this is the ID of this node, and you can jump to something else. So we'll just go through this line by line. So we have a hello world. That would usually be like showed to the user, like one line at a time. It's up to the implementing engine to decide how, but that's how it usually is. We can declare variables, and if you notice right here, it's actually strongly typed. So you can type your variables, you can tell your writers to type them. That'd be really nice. Whoops. These are actually options, so you can say pick your favorite animal, dogs, that'll then write this line, and then it will set this variable that we just find up here to dog, or we can choose cats, same on. Here on crabs, it'll say clickety clack, and then we can jump to another node that we've defined elsewhere. So you see how this is kind of easy for like writers, nothing too complicated, although you can introduce a lot more with commands and functions, which we'll talk about later. And yeah, some of the features included in Yarn Spinner is that you can directly interpolate variables and expressions, which is pretty cool. You can define complex control flow, which if you're writing something more than just like a simple branching narrative, you'll want. So they don't actually have an editor, which is kind of good. They have a try Yarn Spinner, which includes an editor, but they're not like I said, a heavy platform that requires you to write all your stuff in an editor. They instead they have an LSP, an extension for VS Code, that you can actually get inline like errors and warnings for all your stuff, which is pretty cool. For a writer like trying to do something more than just a simple story, if they have several hundred nodes and you have like a few hundred functions, it's really cool because it'll, let's go to the next one. It'll, first of all, it'll give you language hints, and it'll give you like command hints. So if you write documentation for your commands, like in your actual code, it'll inlay those when you hover over them in your Yarn code. So yeah, they have a visual node editor. They have jump to statements, which honestly I couldn't go without.
Is the visual node editor any good?
It's okay, but I wouldn't like rely on it. Again, it's probably for people who have like deeply nested trees, and they need to figure out like weird control flow. So
it's like if you have enough money, is that what it's saying?
Where?
Set credits?
Set
no,
credits.
that's when you actually transact.
Yeah, so it's a...
So it's like a shopping dialogue.
Oh, it's
I
a
think
tree.
so.
It's
Yeah.
a tree of bargaining, I see.
That's cool.
Yeah, so this is just setting credits to adding 5,500. So this is the interesting part. This is what actually I think is most interesting. So how does Yarn Spinner work? And this was actually a rabbit hole that I didn't know was so deep.
Famous words.
Yep. So we're going to talk about language essentials, right? Yarn Spinner is just a language spec. In order to make your own implementation of something like Yarn Spinner for Rust or Yarn Spinner C#, you're going to have to pretty much write like a compiler. So code is not directly runnable. Whatever they say, you can't just directly run a C program. You have to compile that, and then those compiled things, those compiled instructions can then be run by the target architecture, right? So same thing with Yarn Spinner. It's a language format, and you can't directly run Yarn. So we're going to take a little detour and just talk about like the kind of what goes on behind compilation. So take the far left, you got input, and that's your basically a Yarn file, right? That Yarn file will, let's go to the next one actually. So here, actually we're going to talk about myfile.js, so it's JavaScript. That JavaScript file has a single line, and it's called int x is equal to 5. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to lex it. So lexing just means tokenizing in one sense, like you're really just like separating on white space. You're getting all the important things that you want.
They have to have a special
I know, and I didn't like that either, because when I heard lexing, it sounded very complex.
Yeah.
Like lexical analysis really sounded like something way more than what it
It's
was.
a really fancy way of saying tokenizing.
Tokenizing, and then turning it into a vector of identifiers is what
Like
you want.
professors.
Yeah. So next up after that is you have your tokens and you want to parse it. So you're essentially going to pass it through a parser, and you're going to generate a parse tree. These are actually what parse trees look, although this is just like a derived example. But say at your top level node right here, although like your actual top level node is probably over here, like your main or whatever. this is the declaration, and then it might branch into like a type of an int, your identifier, which is an X, and then your assignment, literal, and 5. The reason it's a tree is actually really helpful, and like we'll get to it later. But sorry, what was that?
No, you keep going.
No.
Oh,
No.
So I guess just so I understand correctly, these games are where you actually type in answers.
No, that's up to the engine. That's up to the game engine itself to whether it wants the user to be typing anything.
Okay.
The yarn.
These are
itself
deterministic like choices. Like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, multiple choice mostly.
Multiple choice.
Yeah.
Okay, because I thought this was like it'll parse what you're saying, and then it will. I'm like, what?
No, my bad.
This is
This is how do you implement, because I think it's helpful.
not use it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to how to use it in a second. This is just like what's behind the curtains of what
Right.
yarn actually is, and so we're just talking about how a file goes from that to instructions that a game engine can like run and execute, because that's essentially what we want at the end of this. And so far we've just talked about tokenizing and parsing, and we're at this stage where we have a token tree and we want to act on it again, which is the last step, which is visitors. Visitors, it's a kind of pattern. It's honestly a pattern where you're gonna essentially go down this tree and you have a bunch of visitors, and visitors, all they have is a function called like visit, right? And every time we reach a node in that tree, we're gonna call visit from our visitors, and our visitors are just gonna say like whether they want to be there or not. Like, hey, I'm a visitor that looks at const declarations, right? Or I'm a visitor that does type checking. So I only care about set statements right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a set statement visitor, right? And so whenever it gets past a node that's a set statement, it's going to take over, and it's going to either collect information, generate results, or do some kind of extra work. Yes.
So real quick, then is this like the objects in the world of the story, and then like people are coming in, like visitors are coming and interacting with different
Visitors? No, we're still talking about implementation. This isn't even about like game stuff yet.
This is before.
This
you
is-
get to
yeah.
games
We're
and
just talking
parsing.
about compilers.
He's talking
in
about if you
general.
want to make
Yeah.
a yarn implementation for a
Again,
new
this
language.
does come into play later on,
This
but
is very meta.
this is very
Okay.
meta so far, and I
Okay,
should have
text
led up
language.
to that more. I should have been more clear with that. But right now we're just talking about like the yarn spinner implementation and like the under the hood. So
Okay.
so they have a bunch of visitors. So this visitor is going to look at set statements. So the parse trees of set statements. This is what a parse tree might look like. Again, it's probably pseudocode, but we have like a set up here and an identifier, and then like the actual literal of the identifier, my bad. And then we have another branch that's leading to an expression, which just happens to be 5 plus 5. And then we have an as type. So they typed it like explicitly as an int, which is wrong, right? You're adding two strings, so you should get a string. So this thing is essentially
So these are not specific to this; they're just specific to like this kind of architecture, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You're saying-
compilers.
Well, we're still talking about compilers, yeah. So
Yeah.
you can kind of forget everything about yarn, and then I'll tie it back
But
in.
these are because you're compilers. Okay.
Yeah. Again, but this is still yarn spinner code. Like this is literally what's inside yarn
Right.
spinner. So it'll take the variable type. This is a type checker or a set statement, and it's actually going to do type checking. So all codes, all languages actually have a bunch of visitors in them that will do something similar to this. So if you get like errors in Rust, it's probably because some visitor was parsing the abstracts or the parse tree, not abstract sentence tree, but it was navigating through the tree, and it found like errors, and then it bubbled them back up to the user, and that's why we see errors in Rust. And this is essentially what this is doing, is it's matching the variable with the expression. And if they are, so right here, you see the expression type, and then is assignable to variable type. This is making sure that like, are they the same thing? And they're probably not, because this is a string to
So
an
that's
int.
probably checking like if 5 plus 5 is equal to int.
Yeah, the int,
That's it.
exactly. It's checking the type of the actual literal, but that's not right?
Right,
It's
so
not
it's going to
assignable.
bubble up an error.
So it's going to do self-diagnostics, and it's going to push up an invalid assignment, and then that will eventually get translated to something that a user can see, a diagnostic, and that'll actually get translated to like a line number in a span. So
What is this code from? Is it from the,
this is yarn spinner specifically.
from the Rust implementation? of
Exactly.
Yarn Spinner?
Yes. So how do you
Wow.
generate that? Like, did he write all this code himself? Was he a mastermind? No. So what every language does is not every, sorry, my bad. What a lot of languages do is they'll use something called amp. Antler is called, it's another tool for language recognition. And essentially what this thing does is it generates visitors for you. So instead of making your own parser and your own lexer, which is like a pain in the butt and there's a lot of code, you can just define a grammar that literally looks like the side of right here. This is straight from the Rust, this is straight from the, not Rust, just the Yarn Spinner repo. This is a grammar that defines all of the things that are specific to that language. And so you just run this grammar through Antler, and then it'll generate visitors for you, it'll generate the lexer, and it'll generate the parser, which is fantastic. And it generates the visit methods as well. So like, if you have that set statement thing, you can, it's already generated, you can call like descendants on it, and that's why like, God.
So is it?
I know I'm going off. I'm going off, dude. You can tell me to slow down.
No, is it like robust, like to use Antler and stuff? Like, is it?
It's pretty robust. It's been around for 20, 30-ish years, and the guy who made it is still teaching it like the
Okay, so Antler is not a Rust.
Antler
Not
is not a Rust
specifically.
tool.
I've seen people in the compiler class at UVU use it for stuff like C#.
Yes.
And
You can use it for anything.
Python. Like they have a ton of them.
There is a lot of Antlers though. So there's an Antler for Rust, which he actually used, right? Because you have to have your own version in your language first.
Okay.
And then that'll generate code in your target language. Antler itself I think it's written in Java, I'm not sure, but I think that will only spit out Java code. That, like Java visitors, like how we looked at before, right? So this is all written in Java.
Lovely, lovely Java.
So we have our grammar, and you can actually see, you can make things out from this grammar. Like let's just look at the node, and it's kind of human readable. So I didn't mean human readable. It's understandable. We'll have node, and just like based off what we've seen, we know nodes start with a header, and like you have this plus sign
Like one or more headers?
One or more regex based. Yeah, it looks like regex, right? This body start is actually just like a constant. Like it's straight up like 3 dashes together.
Okay.
And then this body actually points to this body down here. So you see that the body statement is just a statement that is 0 or more, right? And then it ends with the body end, which is just a termination identifier of 3 equals marks. That's just how they chose to do it. So yeah, it's not the most readable thing in the world, but you can kind of grok a little bit at it if you just stare hard enough. The header is just header with an identifier, I think a delimiter, that's just a semicolon, and then it just goes to the header value, which again, they're passing to weird things, but I don't want to do it. Code generation. So you have all of this stuff that Antler generated for you. And this is a different kind of code generation that we're about to talk to. So Antler generated all of these visitors and things for us, and we need to use that somehow in order to generate code that can be run by either a virtual machine or our target machine, right? Well, in the compiler sense, like if you're making C, you want it to be for the target architecture for your CPU chip, and it's just going to be raw like x86 assemblies instructions, right? That's what it's going to spit out. These visitors are the ones generating the code. For Yarn, you're not running your Yarn script on a CPU. Like honestly, it's being interpreted, and that's the main difference. Is this is an interpreted language, so you're going to spit out something that looks like instructions, and that the virtual machine can like act on. So this is a visit from the actual code that will generate. All you have to know is that it's like for add or subtraction, and the only line that's important is the self-generating code for operation. So it's going to do look at the operator and the operator token, and then the type, and then the expression, and then it's going to generate code that will add 2 numbers. That's it. That's all it's doing. And here you'll actually see it. Like it's going to output an instruction that has an opcode of like add or sub, and the operands are going to be like the 2 numbers, the 2 literals, right? You'll see that up here we have a node. It's actually composed of a bunch of instructions. So that's as simple as it gets. The virtual machine is what runs it, and it runs the nodes. So going into like how a computer actually runs a program, like it has a pointer to like the current instruction, right? And the reason it's just not linear, and like it just doesn't execute line by line by line,
is because we can have go-to statements and stuff like that. So in Yarn, we can also have jump statements. So we have to have some kind of idea of a pointer pointing to the current instruction. Let's see. I don't know how we want to keep discussing this. I guess I'll just briefly talk about a virtual machine and then we'll keep going over it. So the library contains all the functions. Like if you think of it like a regular program, you have a vtable that points to virtual functions, or like functions like that are stored, I think on the heap or something like that. Nathan, is that right?
Vtable is mysterious to me.
Yes, it definitely is. But yeah, so that's what stores all the functions. The variable storage is what stores the variables and their values. So it'll call into that every time an instruction calls for like an add to a variable. It'll both use that instruction and it'll get the variable and the value from the variable storage.
So
right?
that kind of similar to what like compilers would call a symbol table, kind of?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so. And yeah, so it has a bunch of pointers into where it's currently at in the function and in the overall program. So the current node kind of points to like the block of code being executed, and then you can think of the state being the actual pointer into the current instruction that we're running, or the current line, right? Because you can kind of think of lines as just like instructions. Here's what like running an instruction actually looks like. So also tell me if I'm like being too slow or like.
You're fine.
Okay, so we're gonna run an actual instruction in this code. This is pulled again from Yarn Spinner. So we have an instruction which has a bunch of operands and an operator or opcode, right? So we're just gonna match over those and then see what we're running. So this one will be jump 2, and we're gonna pull the operand out of the instruction, right here. And we're just gonna set the state, which is the pointer, into the instruction stack, like where we're at. We're just gonna find the instruction for that label, and we're literally just gonna push it over there, right? So that's all it does. Like it just moves the instruction pointer around. That's what a jump 2 is. When we do a run line, we're just gonna pull out the string ID, right? And we're gonna find the actual string inside of our string table, which I don't think it shows it here. But essentially what a string table is, it's an ID to a line map, because if you might have interlizations, so you could have like German or Spanish or something, and you don't want to like hard code your lines inside of your string table or inside of like a hash map, because you want to be able to get like dynamically loaded languages, right? So that's what
Yarn Spinner supports local or internationalization
it does
as well.
Definitely does. So you just provide your own string storage, and then you can it just works seamlessly. So it just pushes to an event called line, and then executes that state, and then again it increments the instruction pointer by 1. So like you're literally just moving 1 down the instruction pointer, and so the next time it runs, it'll just be at that 1. That's like all the magic hidden behind a lot of this. So, user API. I know. That was a lot. So, but it does help simplify a lot of what the user will see and how you will interact with it, because once you know that like that's all it's doing is moving instructions around and like generating instructions, then this will kind of make more sense. So, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to make a compilation. You have a source file, which is your Yarn file, right? You're going to pass in your Yarn file right here. It's going to read it, and your compiler is just going to break it down into instructions and a program that you can run. You need to provide your own text provider and your own variable storage, because it's up to you to manage that. It's actually like helpful because you can change that out. You can, for a variable storage, what if you want to persist something? You can just like change it to a persistent variable storage. And then every time the user reloads it, they'll have like all of their variables still there.
Does it support making some variables persistent and some not?
That's up to you on how you implement it.
Oh,
So
okay.
you have to actually like.
Oh, so I implement
It's
it.
just a trait.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got to work, Nigel. Come on.
String table is
I don't
just a
want
trait.
to.
Text provider is just a trait as well, and
Okay.
no, text provider is just a trait. So if you wanted to just call out to Google Translate, honestly, and you could do that in your implementation.
Here's where
for get
Spencer's
line.
AI comes in.
All right.
Yes. So in order to actually like run something, you need dialogue. So you provide your variable storage and your text provider, your concrete implementations. You box them because that's how you do it in Rust, I guess. And then you add your program's compilation, the program from your compilation.
They're boxing because they're trade objects.
Yes. And then all you have to do is just set a node, and then you're pretty much off to the races. The set node
is helpful because if a user's coming back after playing it like halfway through the game, you can set node into like that specific node if you've saved it or something like that. So, how do you deal with this from like an engine perspective? You look at events. Like that's what you do. You just in your loop, in your run loop, you're just gonna look at events. The events that it'll dispatch based off the code generation is like line, which we looked at, we saw that one, options, and command and dialog complete.
Okay, so then you're responsible for actually formatting the text and putting it in the
Yeah, you can do it however you want. Yeah, you're just provided raw text, but it might be like UTF-8 or something like that. Anyways.
So then something like a Bevy plugin, let's say, might provide you with an actual
Yes.
UI display built in.
Well, they actually just do the integration with most of the Bevy stuff, and they do like the event reader and the event writer, and so you'll get events through the event reader.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
they could have provided a UI, but they didn't.
No, yeah,
Which makes
they
sense,
don't.
because every game's going to load different.
Exactly. So yeah, you'll just read events off you'll just read events off the event reader for like options or line or something like that, and then it's your job to show it.
What is the scope of of one of these sort of yarn spinner node tree thing? Because I'm thinking of games like Night in the Woods or Dredge, and you spend a lot of time not being inside of a dialogue tree in that, and you're like just playing the rest of the game, which I imagine isn't really yarn spinner related, or is it?
No, it definitely shouldn't be. That's let me see if I can get it.
That's where you just get the general stream of events.
Yeah.
If
you
you get a
again, you
dialogue
don't have
event,
to
then you
handle it. Like the thing that moves the variable along, the story along, is this continue function. If you don't actually need to continue, you just don't call this function. You won't get any events. There's nothing for you to handle, right?
But you could, when you interact with a character in the game, then it would be like everything kind of happens in that bubble, and then it's like it just continues the game. Like I guess like some of them can be like that. Some of them can say like, oh, you got the key, so we'll use that later. But like
in that case,
other than that, there's like maybe not a lot that connects.
In that case, you'd probably just, when you construct your dialogue, you can set the node that you're currently on. So if you go to an interaction, you can just say set node to this interaction, and then you just handle the dialogue from there. And then you can say, there's another event down here that I haven't showed, but it's like on node complete. And if you just have like standalone interactions with like random NPCs, you could just have them, give them like a certain ID for a node. And then when that node completes, you just give back full authority back to the game, and you just keep on running. Yeah.
And you can poke variables, I guess, in your variable storage unrelated.
Yeah, so that's what I was
You
gonna
can say
show.
like from that interaction we got this key or these variables.
Yeah. So if you want it to be the other way, where you're telling the narrative something just changed, you can actually just grab your dialogue and then grab a reference to your variable storage and then set values into it. So if something happens outside of your story, you can change the values inside of your story by just updating variables in there.
This seems really cool because then you can kind of test your very non-text adventure game, kind of like a text adventure.
Yeah.
Like you know, click. Okay, the interactions all work.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is cool. This is cool.
Yeah.
So that last one you had on that last slide,
This one?
so you can set it so that your dialogue calls one of your Rust functions by name.
Yes.
That's
Well,
cool.
yeah. So they have where you can add functions, and you can call those functions also from inside of narrative.
Right, from the dialogue.
So you can tell your writers, hey, I have a function called go inside of house or something, or engage in combat.
Or like play the open treasure box sound. Da-da-da-da.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So back here is one last thing I want to show, is that when you get this options thing, it's just a list of options, right? It's still up to you in order to like tell the dialogue which option the user chose. So in this case, you can imagine that you'd be like, all right, I'm in a busy loop on getting user interaction for them to pick an option. And then once they have, it's still your priority, it's still your job to say, dialogue, they selected option 2, so continue from there, right? So then it'll keep continuing from that selected option. So that's just something I want to point out. So that's actually it. That's like the crust of what I wanted to get across, and then there's 3 things that I wanted like you guys to choose from.
What?
It's up to
A
you.
branchy dialogue?
This is
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's so crazy.
I
Like
feel
it's
like
so
this is
meta.
getting really recursive. It's like recursive meta.
Okay, so
I
we
choo-
can
wait,
choose-
wait, wait. I choose to walk 10 feet away and pick
Oh,
Pikachu.
you
Not
were
an option.
by-
Not enough. The Matrix will not allow it. Okay, so you got the 3 options, which is the Rust example, or we can write. The Rust example is a terminal app that will show you a little bit more how it integrates with Bevy. Not Bevy, I bet. Got Nathan excited.
I posted
Come
the
on,
demo
man,
in
I'm
Discord, by
waiting
the way,
for
of the
it.
Bevy demo. Just, it's there for everybody to check out later.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is
Wait,
just a
wait,
terminal
wait.
app. This is
With one of these options, are we gonna die?
that's what end is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Drop that instantly.
nobody
Spoilers.
pick end.
What do you care? Punch the parachute.
Okay,
Watch out,
or
man.
we can just look at some actual yarn code, like from a writer's perspective, and we can go over that. Or we can do both. I'm fine with that. Both.
I have Rust example first.
Rust example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
like-
well,
Okay.
Let's go for it.
So let's. I'm just gonna go to. I'll show you guys where to find it too.
Did you guys see the new editor?
Which
Yes,
one?
what? Oh, Zed?
Yeah, Zed.
I tried it like last year.
Trying to make it amazing or whatever. Trying to make a new one.
Looks awesome.
I love it. I just can't use it on Linux.
This is inside.
What? Really?
Is not Linux available yet? Only
Oh.
Mac OS.
Crazy.
So this is like the Rust implementation of Yarn Spinner, and they have a Bevy, like they do a Bevy implementation.
Right in there.
And then I like how the non-Bevy one is without
Yarn
Bevy,
Spinner.
instead of just doing example and then example with Bevy.
I love it.
That's funny.
Okay, so we're just gonna look at one file, which is the lib. Yeah. So they use Ratatouille as their terminal stuff. So if you recognize a bunch of Ratatouille commands and everything like that.
Their terminal user interface.
Yes,
library.
but I don't want to get too heavy into like explaining everything that they do. We're just looking at the yarn spinner stuff. So one thing we're going to look at first is the status. Oh, I'm glad that did. Is that big enough? Yeah. We're going to look at the status, which they have 3 variants called ready to continue, waiting for continue, and waiting for options. Right, so like we talked about where it's up to you to handle when they get to an options, when it dispatches an options event, you have to handle where it's going afterwards. So this is them trying to handle that.
So wait, what's waiting for continue?
Waiting for continue, I'm not sure.
Would it be
We can find it out together.
Waiting for someone to hit A to go to the.
Oh yeah,
next
I
thing
think
or
it's when they
something like that?
enter. I think it's when they hit enter. So
Oh, it's like
it won't go
they're
without
reading
them.
it, they need to indicate that they
Yeah.
can continue.
I think so.
Option
So-
for not speed reading.
A lot of Yarn plugins will wrap the plain dialogue with some other kind of well, just a wrapper essentially, because they don't want to like expose that, and this is them kind of like wrapping it themselves. So they have a bunch of other stuff that I think is just terminal specific, but again, none of it is really needed. I don't think. So they have metadata status last line, but again, we're just interested in the dialogue. So this is them actually constructing their dialogue. So again, like we saw previously, they just read the file. So from their source path, which is in their assets directory, then they compile it. They add their own string table, right? We saw that. Like here, they're just adding values to the string table. They do a string table. Wait, I thought we already looked at that. I guess they're extending it with the base language, which I don't think is necessary, but you can do that. Here's a base implementation of memory variable storage, and then they construct their dialogue with the variable storage and the text provider. And then you need to add the program from the compilation, right, to your dialogue. They just set the node to the start node. So down here is a bunch of terminal stuff, just getting ready for like the actual terminal. It's not really that important. Here they have another loop to do their terminal. So like you can do key presses to get out of the terminal. Like again, not important to us. And they draw the terminal, which we won't look at. Here, they just pull for input, so if they get a queue, they'll just exit out of the whole program, right? And if they enter, well, I want to look at this because Nathan was asking about it, but if they select waiting for continue, they just do status of ready to continue.
That's
Okay.
if they press
Yeah.
enter.
Yeah, so if they press enter.
So it really is just they're waiting for enter.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So if they get waiting for options, then they have a state variable that they're using, and they're going to modify that state variable to select. So like when the user is like pressing or like up and down on the keypad, they're going to be able to select an actual concrete ID, and then this is where they handle it, and they set the selected option ID in the dialog. That allows it to continue.
Okay.
If you don't select an option, by the way, in the dialog, it'll just error. So you have to show it. It'll just be like that no option was selected, but we're on an option. It'll throw an error for you. So yeah, here's their up and down, which just sets the state of the cursor. So I'm guessing it just changes the.
How can they not be on an option if it's just like an up and down cursor? Does it just not?
I think it defaults to not being selected. I think, from what it looks like.
Don't know.
Well, anyway, sorry, getting too specific.
Yeah, so here's where they're handling the events. Like we looked at this previously. So the self dialog continue. So if it's ready to continue, they're going to pull out any events that are waiting from the dialog. So any events that the dialog has for us, and then we're going to match over them. If it's a line, we're just going to set the line to the last line, or set the last line equal to that, which I imagine they just then shoot off to the terminal, right? If it's option, then they're going to set us in this waiting for options state, which they then handle by pressing enter and then selecting that option. Again, a lot of this is like terminal specific, but I don't want to get too like bogged down by that side. And here's the cool thing is they have commands. So like we were saying, you can have functions, you can define your own functions or commands as a developer, and then give them to your writer, where they can then call them from their yarn spinner code. So like it allows a lot of like flexibility and like extensibility for you essentially. If you want your writer to do something really complex, like fire off like a crazy animation, you don't tell them start with animation 1 and then move to keyframe 30. You just say like start animation Bob, right? So this guy has a command called set background, and it's passed through this event as just like a plain string. And then he yanks out the parameters and then just sets the background to whatever was in that parameter. So yeah.
Nice.
Anything else? Any questions about this? Like, we can actually look at like concrete stuff if you want.
Let's run it.
Run it. Run it. That's a good question. Cargo.
I think this is an actual example.
Oh yeah, so you got to do cargo run example.
Name of the example.
Where'd it go?
It's usually the name
Yarn
of the
spinner
directory,
without Bevy.
unless they remapped it to some other name in their cargo.top.
Yarn spinner without Bevy.
Do you do the underscores, or do you change the underscores to dashes when you do
That's a
it?
good question.
I don't remember.
Just how it is.
Nope. You do good things.
Sorry, that was my bad.
No example name.
Okay, look in cargo.tom.
I bet they didn't add it.
Yeah,
No, that's the compiler. Sorry, I can't see because this thing's like blocking my view.
They don't have.
No, they have a workspace. They have a workspace. They don't have examples right there. Yeah.
If it's in the workspace, or
Yeah, but I
never
think
mind,
you need
you're
to.
right.
I think you need to add a section here that says examples, and then you have to point to it. Otherwise, it's not.
I was
Is
wondering
that
if
true?
it was like in one of the sub modules maybe, but it
But-
looks like it's not.
I thought examples were always runnable if they're in examples.
Probably. You're probably right. It's been a while.
Yeah, if you have a Rust file at the top level, then it's just runnable. But if it's not a Rust file in the examples
Yeah.
directory, then you've got to map it in the cargo.
Okay, so we cannot.
Oh, you could just add the mapping
I don't know how to do that.
right here.
All right, now it turned into PR time. Now we're gonna do PR to open source.
Probably just examples or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. That's funny though
Yeah.
that they didn't make it runnable.
Well, anyways, last thing we'll look at is just
Yeah, how many examples do you look at in Git where you're like, okay, what am I gonna have to do to like get this to run? Like,
I mean, Rust stuff usually you just run it.
Yeah,
I know, but
yeah.
I'm just saying like in general, just like with general
Yeah.
libraries, like sometimes you're like, okay, this example, does it just run, or like do I have to like
And the reason I'm
Rip
not
it out
jumping
and,
into,
like-
oh hey, let's edit it right now is if it's not runnable, chances are it's broken.
Nobody's tested it. Looks good to me. Okay, so this is just the other part of what I wanted to show, which is like what actually
Oh, is it like just
blind you guys.
a playground?
Yeah, so this is a playground that they provide. I also told you it's a company that like runs Yarn Spinner, but like the whole code is open source, so they just like make money off like consultations and stuff like that.
Secret lab.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll run through this, and you can actually just test it, and then that'll like run you through an actual dialogue of how a user might see it. But again, it's up to your engine to implement it how you want it. So
You find yourself in ye dungeon.
yeah, can you read it? Yeah.
You can write.
No, I meant like read it out loud.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yarn Spinner is a language for writing conversations and games. You can use it to write branching dialogue and use it in a game engine.
Okay.
I can read. Yes, I can. For example, here's a choice between some options. Continue. Whoa, some options. Can I put text?
Oh, sorry, I already clicked below some options.
You got it, pal. Continue.
You can also write
Right.
commands.
Commands, which represent things that happen in the game. Continue. In this editor, they'll appear as text. Fade up. 0.0.
Yeah, but if you were a game engine, you could actually parse that, and then you
Okay.
could fade something, which is
Right.
really fancy. Anyways, we won't go the whole thing, but yeah, you can see that they do make use of, actually this is a command, it's not a function, this is a command. And then you can pass arbitrary amount of arguments to it. And
So
then
if you don't put abilities or stuff in your branches, it just keeps going.
it'll just keep falling down, yeah.
Interesting.
So,
So this is how you can have those. It doesn't matter what you pick. You keep going through the same conversation. It's all rails.
so, like, it really is tricky to manage that stuff too, because like, there is an idea of like funneling, you know, where you provide the user an idea of like them getting like user choice, you know, but then you funnel them back into like all of the same story ending. Baldur's Gate did not do that, like a really popular game that just came out.
Yeah.
They actually have like something like 1,700 unique endings.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that crazy.
That's a lot of it.
So they did not funnel at all.
It's like, it like goes like this. It's just like,
just keep going.
Well, there's a lot of games that just like you pull up the dialogue stuff. Like I know Hollow Knight, you go onto the wiki and they like just have this thing where you can just view the whole thing of dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's just like massive. And so like even for a game like that, it's just like you can have a massive table of dialogue.
Yeah, for sure. And then
that's like what my wife was doing with my kids. She was like, it's like, okay, let's go to this page and find out what would happen if we did that. And so they go through like all the different endings of the book. Like,
Yeah. I remember the old game Star Control 2. It almost didn't matter what you picked because they all funneled you back. Like if you picked the thing they didn't want, they basically they'd like eliminate that option and be like, give it some funny response, and then you go back to the remaining options.
Usually that's frowned upon in D&D from what I've seen. If you just funnel all your players, no matter what they do.
well, anyways, that's the end of my presentation.
All right,
Cool.
thank you.
and we didn't die.
I hope
We
you
didn't
guys.
die.
We didn't die.
What?
I hope you guys learned stuff about compilers. 'Cause, like I definitely did, and that was really exciting for me to like, understand a little bit about it.
It
Even
seems
though,
like you went through a lot.
It was just the surface. Can I tell you?
Right.
It was just the surface.
Yeah.
And I was trying to like skim it down too. I was like, this is gonna turn into a compiler talk.
That's,
No, but
that's
okay,
about the level
so-
that the UVU class does it at. But you, instead of like using Antler, they like you to write everything
Yeah.
manually.
Yeah.
But like it's all those same concepts.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So is this compiler
That's right,
custom,
you
or is
did
it
the-
just a
the
compiler
compiler.
that's
Did you
used
do the
like
Just
compiler
for this
talk a
case.
few months ago?
just for this case?
Yeah.
And so, but
I know something.
was it like a lib that it would use from like the Rust implementation of this lib and like for like data bindings to it, or like does it just like is it its own compiler that's custom for Rust? Like how does that?
It's its own compiler that's custom to Yarn Spinner, not even Rust.
not even Rust,
Yeah.
but it's like so it's like a library that it accesses
Yes.
basically
Library.
and communicates with the library, and then on top of that it's just the bindings or whatever to Rust.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the like counterpoints that you say like you wouldn't want to use RenPy or something else like that is because they hide all of that stuff from you, and they just give you the raw events of like lines and stuff like that. They don't actually let you interact anything lower level. And that's why a lot of people don't use them, but again, there's still a big niche out there.
Nice.
It's really interesting. I'm glad that I didn't realize that so many of these cool dialogue-based indie games have the kind of this dialogue system in common. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like all the big names and all these things. You're like, what?
all the like medium names.
Yeah, they're definitely more indie type games that use narratives, but again, like Skyrim uses this, or at least something like it. So, you know, there definitely is AAA games that are taking the ideas from this, if not using this, but yeah.
So yeah, and nothing of this is AI. It's all
Yet.
You can use AI to generate the things that you put in the options, at least.
Right.
Technically.
Yeah, just tell it to spit out a yarn spinner.
You could have
dialogue,
AI
just
write the
tell
story
Chat-
as
ChatGPT,
it
give me a
happens,
bunch
so
of
you're like,
dialogue
I have no
options for
idea
stuff.
what AI is going to take me, like,
Yeah,
goes.
that'd be cool.
like I saw this, one of my favorite new YouTubers, he did it was a joke, he's like, I replaced my wife with like AI or something, and it was like, and he had his friends try to flirt with this AI like in text and stuff. And it's like, who do you choose between or something? It was like, and she friend zoned one of them on accident like the first day or something, or just like
Yeah.
But like it's totally random because it's AI, and so there's no like, there is some context over like conversations, but it's also like, it's still kind of spaghetti. I don't know, because it's like all over.
Trying to give you what looks like a real answer.
What looks like a real answer, and like, but there's no spine to it. You know, there's no like, you went here and so here, and like this is the context of what I'm thinking now. And
I tried to make so I really like reading conversation on Discord. I don't know if that's just me, but like I tried to make an AI bot that would like have multiple personalities and essentially just argue with itself on Discord. Yeah, because I wanted to read like.
Oh, this is the guy that can keep you busy.
Let me finish the story. Is they talk nothing but gibberish, and then they would lose their sense of personality. So like I would tell them like, you're this bot, you act like this, right?
Oh, you're like AI powering them.
Yeah. So there was actually multiple agents, right? So they were all like run off their own thing. But once they read the chat history, they would get confused again by who they are, and then they would act as other people. And so it was just like, it would diffuse into nonsense every time. So yeah, that project crashed and burned.
it like it degenerates every time. Like it deteriorates every time. Like it just like.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a regular Discord argument.
But that's what I've heard is
Twitter at that
happening
point.
to AI is like it's deteriorating.
Yeah.
It's like.
Maybe with longer contexts, it might get better because like Claude has like a ginormous context length.
But I will say there is a booming business right now for creating content for AI to consume. That's actually a huge like thing
Do you
I've
want to
seen.
ethically source their training data or
You
something?
know, they're saying the people know what they're doing. They're getting paid to input. Like it's like data annotations and like other companies, Clickworker or something. I think there are ones that where they take. You provide pictures, you provide like, hey, how did you like this experience that you had there? Like they're trying to look for like stuff they can say, and then also like Reddit did a deal where
They sell their data.
they sold all the data or whatever. So I don't know.
Notes on the presentation.
I think you did fantastic.
Good.
Yeah, no, that was
Great.
great.
Yeah. Nice slides.
I didn't die.
Nobody died.
Spencer didn't die.
Who killed Kenny?
Ooh. Okay, cool. Well, I'll go ahead and turn off the stream. We can still stay and chat and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, bye stream.
Bye, stream.